This video provides instructions on how to complete an initial authorization questionnaire. The purpose of completing this document is to provide the comprehensive clinical information required for the initial authorization of services through the North Carolina Medicaid and North Carolina Health Choice programs. The administrative ACE team will use the questionnaire to complete the process of authorization for you, allowing you to continue providing clinical services. Immediately after a clinical user completes a plan of care for a patient with a funding source of North Carolina Medicaid or North Carolina Health Choice, ACE will automatically send an inbox message requesting that the user complete an initial authorization questionnaire. Before jumping right into the questionnaire, it's important to first gather the information needed to complete the document. Remember, order of operations is important, just like when you're baking a cake. Let's begin by first returning to the patient record by tapping the main patient navigation icon and then tapping the patient name to open the patient record. Prior to starting the initial authorization questionnaire, the clinical user will first need to open the evaluation from the EMR tab in the patient record. The most recent evaluation information must be included in the initial authorization questionnaire, and the best way to do this is to reference the evaluation documentation as you are entering the data into the initial authorization questionnaire forms. The clinical user will narrow the search for the document type of evaluation and then tap the search button. The search results will open to the default ACE viewer. The clinical user will need to change the viewer to local by tapping the radio button. This will open the document using a different application on the user's device, most often Adobe. By opening the document outside of the ACE program, the user can toggle back and forth, completing ACE documentation forms while also referencing the document from the patient's EMR. Now that the patient's most recent evaluation report is open and available for viewing on the device, the user may return to the patient record and tap on the Documentation tab. The clinical user will next tap on the Initial Authorization Questionnaire button. The programming for authorization questionnaires is the same as the plan of care in that it does not save the data entered cumulatively, and it must be completed in one session. When the user attempts to exit the questionnaire, ACE will alert the user that all of the data will be deleted and ask if the user is sure that they want to exit the questionnaire. When you are certain that you have time available to complete the document in one sitting, tap the green button to complete the document. The user will enter the authorization start and end dates that they would like to request from the funding source. Since this is an initial plan of care, choose a start date at least 5 business days in the future to allow for the processing of the authorization by the funding source review team. The end date would be no more than 6 months from the start date. To enter the start date, tap on the blue calendar button. The start date can be the current plan of care begin date, as long as it is at least the current date, meaning no prior dates. Or the user can use the calendar button to choose a future start date. To enter the end date, the user will tap on the blue calendar icon. The end date can be entered by tapping on Calendar, Current Plan of Care's end date, or can be calculated 6 months after the start date. Typically, initial authorization requests are for 6 months after the start date. A clinical user can choose the current plan of care end date if their plan of care is shorter than a 6-month duration. Once the dates are entered, the user will tap the green Continue button. The user selects all statements that apply to the patient's past therapy history. If the user chooses a statement with an asterisk, they are required to provide an explanation in the text box provided. The user next selects statements that apply to the patient's reason for referral for the current episode of care. If the user chooses a statement with an asterisk, they are required to provide an explanation in the text box provided. Tap the green button to continue. The user will select all statements that apply to the patient's prior level of function. If the user chooses a statement with an asterisk, they are required to provide an explanation in the text box provided. Tap the green Continue button. The user will next answer the question about whether therapy services will be provided in the primary language of the patient. The user answers the question about providing patient and caregiver education and implementing a home program. ACE will next display the current short-term goals from the patient's current plan of care. While a user can write more than 5 goals to address during the authorization period, the user must assign a number from 1 to 5 for up to 5 goals to identify the goals as being used to request authorization. These goals will be tracked as funding goals from authorization to authorization, and the numerical system allows ACE to assist you with this tracking process. When the funding goals are identified numerically from 1 to 5, the user will tap the green Continue button. ACE will track these funding goals and display them to the clinical user when the reauthorization questionnaire is completed. As a compliance feature, as well as a significant time saver, ACE automatically enters the skilled interventions identified from the current plan of care. Toggle to the ACE evaluation from the patient EMR that is open in another application on your device. This will allow you to provide a summary of the functional status of the patient, as well as the most recent test scores. The user will tap Sign Authorization Questionnaire, and the password box will open. Enter your ACE password and tap Sign. ACE will provide the user with a confirmation message that the document has been signed and filed in the EMR. It will also remind the user to sync the data. It's important for the user to sync after completing an authorization questionnaire because ACE will send an alert message to the admin group so that they will now know to enter the authorization request into the funding source's website. The ACE admin team will not receive your documentation until and unless you sync your device. When authorization of services is received for the patient, the clinical user will receive a scrolling alert and an inbox message, letting them know that services have been authorized. Tap on the inbox message associated with the scrolling alert to open it and view the authorization details. The inbox message contains a link to the patient record and alerts the clinical user of the authorization dates and number of authorized visits. You can view the authorization in the patient's EMR under the document type Authorization. This inbox message does not delete automatically. After you schedule the patient's recurring appointments, you should delete the message by tapping Delete Message. This concludes the initial authorization questionnaire instructions for ACE. For further information, feel free to watch the video again and pause as necessary. Additionally, you may consult the written clinical ACE manual for detailed instructions and screenshots related to specific features and tasks.